Imagine New York City, March 1911. A fire starts on the 8th floor of a building called the Ash Building, where a company called Triangle Shirtwaist employs mostly young immigrant women, many of them teenagers, to sew blouses. The doors are locked from the outside. That's not a metaphor. The owners had locked the exit doors during shifts because they suspected the workers were stealing scraps of cloth. When the fire spreads, the workers cannot get out. Some jump from the 9th floor windows to the pavement. Some take the outdoor iron fire escape that buckles from the heat and the weight and collapses. 146 people die from it all. The city was horrified. Laws were passed. Reforms were fought for. It became one of the founding stories of the modern American labor movement. And 102 years later, in the spring of 2013, a garment factory in Bangladesh called Rana Plaza collapsed with roughly 1,100 workers inside. Cracks had been seen in the walls the day before. The bank and shops on the lower floors had closed. The garment factories were ordered to stay open. Same logic, different building, different century. Why did we do it again? Because the engine we've been talking about doesn't care about the reforms of 1911. It cares about which factory can make the shirt cheaper this quarter. If you missed the last two walks, my name is Scott. This is episode 3 of Philosophy Walking. This is our 360-degree walk through Corsi, and the short version of the series is this. Competition is an engine. It has no conscience, and when you point it at something you don't own, it will burn that thing down to hit its target. This isn't anti-competition. It's about what happens when competition becomes the only thing we're allowed to have. Last time we watched it aimed at nuclear weapons. Today we watch it aimed at your job. Here's another example, and maybe one you've discovered yourself. There aren't enough good jobs out there. And I mean good jobs, not just any jobs. Because the story we're told, especially in the wealthier countries, is that unemployment is low, so everything must be fine. But that number doesn't tell you the truth of most people's lives. It doesn't count the person working 3 part-time jobs to make what one job used to pay. It doesn't count the graduate with a degree working retail because the career they trained for doesn't hire anymore. It doesn't count the millions who gave up looking. It doesn't count the person in Manila or Lagos or Cairo sending out 100 applications a week for work that would pay a wage they can actually live on. In some cases, there are thousands of applicants for one position, and everyone is forced to compete for a smaller slice of the pie. Many jobs can pay people less because there are so many applicants. Most people have to take what they can get to survive, right? Wages haven't kept up with productivity in decades. The work has gotten more, the pay has stayed flat, and the difference went somewhere. Guess where? How does that competition help most people? The answer, it doesn't. It helps whoever's on the other side of the table, and there are fewer of them every year. And notice who wins that arrangement. Not the workers competing against each other for scraps, whether those workers are in Ohio or Manila or Manchester. The employer, who gets to pick from 100 desperate people and pay whichever one will take the least. That's what competition is good for you looks like when you're the one being competed over. And it works across borders too. A factory closes in one country because the same work can be done cheaper in another, and the workers in both places end up worse off while the shareholders in a third place do better than ever. The word competition makes it sound like a fair fight. It isn't. It's a fight where one side wrote the rules and the other side just showed up hungry. Now think back to the fire in 1911. The reason those doors were locked wasn't cruelty, it was competition. Every garment factory in New York was competing with every other one on price. Every corner cut on safety was a penny saved on a shirt. Locking the doors saved the company a fraction of a cent per blouse. The women died for a fraction of a cent per blouse. After the fire, they wrote the laws, safety codes, fire escapes, union recognition. It took the deaths of 146 people to make it happen, but it happened. And then quietly, over the next 50 years, the factories moved. First to the American South, where the wages were lower, then to Mexico, then to China, then to Bangladesh. And when Rana Plaza collapsed, the news blamed a corrupt building inspector, a greedy factory owner, an incompetent government. All of that was probably true. But those people, like the employer in Manhattan in 1911, were pieces on a board. The engine was still running. It just crossed an ocean to escape the rules. So how do you know when the game is being run on you specifically? Because your employee handbook isn't going to tell you 5 things to watch for. The first is the gap between what your company says and what it does. We're a family is one of the biggest lies in corporate life. Families don't lay off their members to hit a quarterly earnings target. Families don't have HR departments. If your company keeps saying, "We're all in this together," and then announces layoffs the week after a record earnings report, you're not in a family, you're on a spreadsheet. Watch the actions. The words are the distraction. The second is what happens to the money when the company does well. Productivity in the American economy has climbed for 50 years. Wages haven't kept up. That gap, trillions of dollars over decades, went somewhere, and it wasn't to the people doing the work. After every profitable quarter, ask a simple question. Did the workers get raises? Or did the executives get bonuses and the shareholders get a stock buyback? A stock buyback is a company using its profits to buy back its own shares, driving the price up, enriching whoever owns the stock, which is mostly the executives whose pay is tied to it. It's a machine for moving money from labor to capital, and it's completely legal. And here's the part that doesn't get said out loud enough. CEOs compete against each other too, not for market share, for their own pay packages. Board X pays its CEO $20 million. So Board Y feels pressure to pay theirs $22 million, or their CEO leaves for a competitor. Every board benchmarks its comp package against every other board's comp package, and the ratchet only goes one direction. In the 1960s, the average American CEO made about 20 times the pay of the average worker at their company. Today, the S&P 500 average is around 300 times. That didn't happen because CEOs got 15 times more talented in 60 years. It happened because CEOs figured out they could compete against each other for pay, and the money to pay for it had to come from somewhere. A lot of it came from you. The third is the language they use when they're doing something harmful. Layoffs are almost never called layoffs. They're right-sizing, streamlining, restructuring, aligning resources with our forward strategy. Cutting benefits is modernizing compensation. Denying you a raise is market competitive pay. A company that fires you with a smile has hired people whose whole job is to make it sound like they're doing you a favor. Learn the vocabulary. Every one of those phrases is designed to keep you from being angry about something you should be angry about. The fourth is who bears the cost when things go wrong. When a company makes a bad decision, a failed product, a compliance disaster, a bad acquisition, watch who pays for it. Is it the executives who approved it, or the workers 3 levels down who now don't have jobs? A CEO who oversees a catastrophe and leaves with a 9-figure exit package while the frontline workers get 2 weeks of severance has told you exactly what kind of arrangement you're in. It isn't partnership, it isn't shared risk, it's a system where you carry the downside and they collect the upside. And the words on the break room wall don't change that. The fifth is whether the company is trying to maximize your productivity or trying to do good work. These sound like the same thing. They aren't. There's a principle called Goodhart's law that goes like this. When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. Once you start optimizing for the metric instead of the actual thing the metric was measuring, you get more of the metric and less of the thing. Warehouses that track every second of your time down to bathroom breaks aren't optimizing for good work. They're optimizing for a number on a dashboard. Call centers that grade you on call length aren't optimizing for happy customers. They're optimizing for how many people you can rush off the phone. Teachers whose reviews depend on test scores aren't optimizing for education. They're optimizing for the test. Nurses whose shifts are managed by patient per hour metrics aren't optimizing for care. They're optimizing for throughput. And every time a metric becomes the goal, the actual work gets worse, the workers get more miserable, and the customer or student or patient at the other end gets a worse outcome. The people running the dashboard don't care. The dashboard says the number went up. If your job feels like it's turned into a game of hitting numbers you know are stupid, that isn't paranoia. That's Goodhart's law running your workday. And the person at the top of that org chart usually knows the numbers are stupid too. They just also know their bonus depends on them. Now flip it around, because you're not just an employee. You're also somebody's customer, somebody's user, somebody's account number. And how a company treats you when you're on that side of the transaction tells you the exact same story from a different angle. Here's what to watch for. Watch what happens when you have a problem. A company that genuinely cares about you makes it easy to reach a human being when something goes wrong. A company that thinks of you as a cost center makes it as hard as possible. Let me give you an example that'll sound familiar to almost anyone listening. Years ago, I called my university's financial aid office with a simple question. Did my student loan and grant go through? The financial aid number wasn't listed directly. I had to call a general university number and work my way through a phone tree. For admissions, press 1. For registration, press 2. Layer after layer, each menu pushing me deeper, each choice narrowing me down. I finally got to the option that said financial aid, and the line disconnected. Not a person telling me to call back, just dead air. That wasn't an accident. That was a system working exactly the way somebody designed it to work. Every human interaction costs money. Every question answered is a salary being paid. So the institution builds a maze, and the maze is the point. If you give up, they win. If half the callers give up, they save half a call center. That's the math. And it's the same math whether you're calling a university, an insurance company, a cable provider, or a government agency that's been modernized by people who don't want to talk to you. Watch the automation and the outsourcing. In the last few years, this has gone industrial, automated customer service, chatbots that loop you through the same 3 answers regardless of what you type, AI voice agents that sound almost like humans but can't actually solve anything because the moment your question is off script, they don't know what to do. And when a company does use humans, more and more of those humans are in call centers in countries where the wages are a fraction of what they'd be at home, staffed by people the company has trained to use invented American names. Hi, this is Kevin. Reading from rigid scripts they can't deviate from. Add in the language gap between a customer in one country and a worker in another, and you get conversations where neither side can really help the other. This isn't a knock on the workers. They're doing their best under conditions the company designed for them. It's a knock on the company because the friction is deliberate. The chatbot that can't help you is a feature, not a bug. The rep who can't understand your question and can't go off script is a feature, not a bug. The company knows perfectly well its customers can barely get real help. They chose it anyway, because the cheaper support operation generates a better quarterly number, and that number is what gets rewarded. Watch the PR speak. Companies talk about customers the way politicians talk about voters. We value your feedback. Your call is important to us. We're committed to serving you better. Every one of those phrases is designed to sound like something is being done while nothing is being done. When you actually complain, you get an apology template. When something goes badly public, you get a mission statement about how the company is going to do better. When lawsuits pile up, you get a settlement with a non-admission of wrongdoing clause. The words are choreography. The actions are what tell you where you stand. Watch what happens to the survey. Every company sends satisfaction surveys. Almost none of them act on the results in any meaningful way. If they did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The survey exists mostly so the company can say in the next quarterly report or press release, we listen to our customers. What they mean is they collect data on you, not that they change anything based on it. If you've ever filled out a 2-page survey after a bad experience and never heard from anyone and nothing about the experience ever changed, you already know this. The survey was the ritual, not the response. The pattern with all of it is the same. If a company genuinely valued you as a customer, they would spend money on your experience. When they don't spend the money, they still want you to feel valued, because feeling valued keeps you buying. So they spend a much smaller amount on making you feel valued through language, surveys, and apology templates. It's cheaper than actually valuing you, and it works often enough that the whole industry does it. Now, some employers really are just pieces on the board. They didn't set the rules. If they don't cut wages, their competitor does, and their competitor eats their lunch. The engine has them too. Some of them genuinely wish they could pay you more and treat their people better and answer the phone when you call. But a lot of them aren't just playing the game. They're playing it hard, and they're playing it against you. They're the ones lobbying against minimum wage increases. They're the ones hiring union-busting consultants the moment workers try to organize. They're the ones adding non-compete agreements to entry-level jobs to keep you from leaving for a better offer. They're the ones classifying you as a contractor to avoid paying benefits. They're the ones building the phone tree that disconnects you and calling it customer experience improvement. Those aren't structural pressures. Those are choices, made by specific people. Who could have chosen differently and enriched themselves less? The engine is real. It squeezes everyone. But some people, faced with the squeeze, decide to squeeze you harder to relieve their own pressure. And the higher up the ladder they sit, the more choice they had about it. That's not the engine. That's them. And pretending it isn't is how they've gotten away with it for as long as they have. The people who set the board, the ones who wrote the rules that made this the winning move, those are the ones we've been trained not to see. And in the next walk, we're going to look right at them. 2 players in particular across the next 2 walks. One wears a suit and stands behind a podium and tells you they're fighting for you. The other wears a suit and stands behind a boardroom table and tells you they care about your family. They use the same tricks. They tell you the same lies. And once you know the tells, you'll never listen to either of them the same way again. Next walk, the 4 tells. How to spot a corrupt politician. Come back for it. It'll change how you watch the news.